Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan, and I hope you all had a happy Easter. In this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about how wrestling relates to the other topics that I talk about, and then I'm just going to give a somewhat brief history of my time as a wrestling fan. So let's get started. When I first began planning for my podcast, the biggest question I had was, what am I going to talk about? Or rather, how am I going to take what I want to talk about and pick one of the topics to be the focus of the show? I didn't want to leave any of them out, so I made the decision to use all of them. My only concern was how to include wrestling. I've been a fan since I was about 7 years old, and it's one of my biggest interests, but it's quite a bit different from books and movies. Or is it? At its core, I don't think so. It's all about storytelling and characters. Initially, I may have been drawn to wrestling by the spectacle of watching people beat each other up, but it was the larger than life characters that held my interest. I started watching at just the right time, too. The WWF, or WWE as it's now called, was gaining steam on a national level. They were signing a lot of top stars from the smaller wrestling territories, and the invention of WrestleMania in 1985 propelled them to new heights. Hulkamania was also running wild. The first tape I can remember renting was WrestleMania 3, which featured one of the most iconic moments in wrestling history, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Hogan had a ton of charisma, and it's easy to see why he was so popular. However, I'd like to point out that I was never a Hulkamaniac. My mom might tell you otherwise, but that's not how I remember it. I remember being a fan of the Ultimate Warrior. His intensity and energy were unmatched, running down to the ring, shaking the ropes, smashing his opponents. Wrestling was full of other interesting characters as well. Macho Man Randy Savage, Mr. Perfect, the Million Dollar Man, and I could go on and on. By the late 90s, the popularity of wrestling exploded to new levels that were never seen before and haven't been seen since. This was in large part to the great storytelling at the time, namely the creation of the New World Order in WCW and the WWE's rivalry between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mr. McMahon. This was must-see TV, and I remember flipping back and forth between the two shows, trying to catch everything that happened. The characters and storylines were as great as any in the best books I've read. It was at this time I also met one of my best friends in life, Steve. One day on the school bus, I overheard him talking to the bus driver about wrestling, and I gathered my courage and started talking to him, and we've been friends ever since. Unfortunately for the wrestling business, WCW couldn't keep up, and this led to them being purchased by the WWE in 2001. Despite some missed opportunities, there was still a lot of great stuff happening in the 2000s. Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle became a huge success in a short amount of time. The Undertaker was still going strong with his undefeated WrestleMania streak, and Lucha legends Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio became world champions. But megastars Stone Cold and The Rock would move on, and the product slowly started going downhill. The WWE no longer had any major competition, and they seemed to lose their edge. The storylines became less interesting and the characters more plain. The WWE was creating new stars like John Cena and Batista, who were a lot more bland than their predecessors. My interest in wrestling waned for a little while. I still followed the news online and kept up with what was happening, but I was watching a lot less. Things changed around 2015. This is when I discovered NXT, which was and still is somewhat of a developmental brand for the WWE's main roster. It featured lots of great action and interesting characters. It also brought something new to the table: women's wrestling. Women had been wrestling for a while, and there were some very talented performers, such as Lita, Trish Stratus, Molly Holly, and Beth Phoenix, to name a few. But the women's division as a whole was never taken very seriously. They were often relegated to goofy gimmick matches, and their serious matches usually felt like an afterthought. In NXT, I feel they were finally treated equally, and they were putting on matches that were just as good as the men and sometimes better. Unlike before, they were finally getting time to showcase what they could do. Bayley versus Sasha Banks at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn is one of my favorite matches of all time. And when I talk about storytelling in wrestling, I'm not just talking about what happens outside the ring. The actual matches themselves can tell great stories, and Bayley versus Sasha was an example of that. In that same year, I also discovered Lucha Underground. It was fresh and exciting to watch a show focused on lucha libre, which is the term used for wrestling in Mexico and is its own unique style. When WCW was still around, they had a fantastic cruiserweight division that featured a lot of talented luchadors, so it was great being able to watch that style again. Unfortunately, Lucha Underground only lasted a few years. You can check it out for free though, as all seasons are available on the streaming service Tubi. Alright, so fast forward to 1 year ago. I still have NXT, but the WWE's main shows continue to drag. The roster is very talented, I just feel it's lacking in other areas, and I'm interested in something different. All Elite Wrestling, or AEW, is a brand new promotion, and they also have a tremendous roster with some of my favorite wrestlers formerly of NXT and Lucha Underground, like Adam Cole and Pentagon Jr. I've watched bits and pieces, but I don't have cable, so I haven't seen much of their main shows. However, I'm definitely rooting for them to succeed because the WWE needs to have serious competition again. I did discover something else though. World Wonder Ring Stardom, or just Stardom for short. I was on YouTube one night and found this match, Shuri versus Utami Hayashishita. This was my first exposure to Stardom, and I've been hooked ever since. I'll see if I can get the link and put it in the description of this episode. This was a fantastic match. I could probably do a whole episode on it, and this is another one that I'd put on my all-time favorites list. Stardom is an all-women's promotion in Japan. Wrestling promotions in Japan are generally all-male or all-female, though they will work together on certain shows. Stardom addresses a few of the gripes that I have with WWE. They have quality matches on a consistent basis, less time wasted on non-wrestling segments, and talking that feels more natural and not so heavily scripted. If you're a wrestling fan, I strongly encourage you to give it a try. If you're not a wrestling fan, I still encourage you to at least check out the match I mentioned and see how it makes you feel. That was Shuri versus Utami from June 12th of 2021, and again, I'll include that in the description for this episode. Some of my favorites in Stardom right now are Starlight Kid and Tekla, and the promotion as a whole is just a lot of fun to watch. Plus, in the year that I've been following it, it just keeps getting better and better. That's all I have for today. I could have easily gone a lot longer on this topic, but I was trying not to ramble too much. If you have questions about anything I talked about, please reach out to me on Twitter at @ahappymomentpod. Oh, one more thing actually. After doing an episode talking about my history as a wrestling fan, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my all-time favorite wrestler, and that would be Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret wrestled in the WWE for about 13 years. In 1997, he would go to WCW. In the year 2000, he was forced to retire early due to an injury. Bret is known as the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. He brought authenticity to his matches and was a master at his craft. Now that I've talked about Bret, I feel more comfortable ending the episode. Just remember, any time is a good time to talk about wrestling, and feel free to hit me up anytime if you want to chat about it. I'll definitely be doing more episodes like this in the future. Thanks for listening. Go watch Utami vs. Shuri, and I'll see you next time. Bye.